All right, we're back with turn 7 in our campaign game, and let's do a quick recap. Last turn towards the end, Dacca fell, and with it North India, and that means that the India track is at this point in unrest, which basically gives me 3 turns to try to retake Dacca here. There were very low ground casualties in the Japanese assault on Dacca. So he's got a large force there. He's got basically 3 armies right there and the Koreans behind him. But I've also got a significant force over here, and I've got more guys that I could bring back as replacements. So I think the game plan here is twofold. One is to build up some additional ground replacements to try and get a bigger stack to attack with. But at the same time, if I can get rid of, right, you can see he's got a CBL there covering Dacca. Because he can't stack air there at this point. So if I could knock out the CBL, then that makes his ground forces susceptible to my air-naval attack, or it forces him to try and shuttle in additional naval forces from the Philippines and the Pacific, which starts to get inconvenient for him in terms of the use of activation. So there's sort of a general plan over there. A few other things to note. We are at this point still at a war in Europe of -5, so that means I'm still down here with only 3 ASPs this turn. That also means I only have to make 3 progress of war this turn. The political will is at +3, so that, as you'll recall, is sort of in the marginal territory. So as far as my goals for this turn, number 1 is to build up to, I probably won't have a good crack at Dacca here this turn, but if I can build up and get a shot next turn, that'd be great. And by the way, one thing you'll note, this, because Dacca is actually, let's toggle the pieces, it's a clear terrain hex, and so another advantage, if I can take out his CBL here and he doesn't have any naval over here at the moment that I attack, then I should be able to get a +2 for naval supremacy. I probably won't get air supremacy, but if I can get +2 for naval supremacy, that'll really help a lot in my counterattack. And that, by the way, is one reason that the Allies would sometimes prefer to disengage from Dacca and then attack on their own terms when they have a shot at having naval supremacy. But of course, there's some risk associated with that because India will go into revolt at some point there. In any event, in addition to building up replacements and trying to take out his naval and some of his air there in the CBI, my other goal really has to be to make progress of war here, because given that my political will is at +3, I really cannot afford to have it drop any further. Both sides are still under ISR here, and subs have also hit again, so he's down to 4 ASPs, and he will have 6 cards and 1 pass. For R&R, this is turn 7, and since we're delayed, that means that this is actually the turn that the Allies get the big turn 6 fleet reinforcements, which is nice. So finally, the Essex-class carriers are starting to come on with CBLs. We've got another Marine division as well, and then over in the CBI, it's mainly tons of replacements, lots of Allied air replacements, and some ground guys here. Just to show you what's there. Let's take a quick look at cards so that we can talk about the hand. This is what I drew, and it's kind of interesting. You'll notice we've got another war in Europe over here. It's still 1943. It's the last turn of 1943, so this will only be worth 2 rather than 3. But that's going to take us finally up out of losing ASP territory, which is great. So we're looking forward to that and hoping that the Japanese, well, it's very unlikely that the Japanese would be able to move it by 2 at this point because it's 43 and they've already spent a bunch of cards. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. This, who knows what'll happen. We might get to use it as an intercept. Probably at this point in the game, it's maybe a little more likely that we will use it for a 1OC, but you never know. And with any luck, we'll have a chance to use the sub to take a shot at his fleet. This is nice. You'll recall we're over here in the +3 region at this point. I'd love to get up to +4, so this will do that. And then we've got to military events as well. Anakim is somewhat limited. It's a logistics value of 3 and no naval units, so it's not likely to get used in the Pacific at this point, probably more likely the CBI, and historically it was a Burma offensive. Victor plans is great. It's 6 logistics on the southwest, so we'll definitely do something fun with that. And then you'll recall over here we have got Halsey, carrier raids on Japan, and that is worth 8 if used on Central Pacific. And if we can actually get in a shot at Japan with it, we can pull a card from the Japanese hand. It's still going to be tough because you can't see because it's covered up, but this is, just as a reminder, it's a 2-0C, which means that we're pretty much out of range to be able to hit Japan right at the moment, but that could change during the turn. We'll have to see. So if we look at where we're going to make progress of war, recall we down here we've got 3 ASPs, so we need to make 3 progress of war, and likely spots would include, I think now would be a good time to probably take either Rabaul or Guadalcanal. We've really been saving up stuff here in the Solomons, and we can continue to take 1 hex a turn, but I think it might be good to take at least Rabaul or Guadalcanal, possibly both of them, but at least one of them to begin to set up taking the rest of the Solomons. Another good opportunity would be Biak, and let's take a look. You can see that Biak is also not under any Japanese ZOI at this point, and he really couldn't put any replacements there, you'll see, because it's under my ZOI. So that's with only a 2-6 there and no ZOI and a good, I've got a couple with Halsey, and with Victor plans I've got a couple of good ECs that could bring a lot of force that he really wouldn't want to trade with. So that makes Biak another good alternative there as well. And then finally, this is turn 7, and we need to have a bomber base by the end of turn 8. I've got a couple of good cards this turn, so I think I may want to try and use one of those event cards to take either Iwo Jima or Marcus as a bomber base, because there's no guarantee that I'll have a good hand with good cards for that next turn, and so if I can do it this turn, that would be great to do. So those are some of the alternatives for my progress of war this turn. It looks like I probably won't have too much trouble making it. And you'll remember we're both under ISR at the moment, so I decide that now is a good time to go after Biak, because he's got a lot of reaction stacks with 9/12s, but he doesn't really have any kind of reaction stacks with smaller forces that might mess with a single Marine division. And so I'm going to go ahead, and what I actually decide to do here is to play Victor plans, which is 6 + 2 is an 8. It's only a 2-0C, and so if I basically send the Marines over here, and I'm going to actually send 3 battleships and 4 carriers. It's probably overkill, but the point here is to make it insane for him to try and stop this. You'll recall I've only got 3 ASPs, so I can't afford to screw up and waste one, so there's no way we want him being able to win the air-naval combat and send the Marines packing. And so basically with 3 battleships and 4 carriers, I've got 99 factors here. He can only react with at most 4 units because it's a 2-0C, and he can only react with South Seas. Biak actually is 13 hexes from combined fleet, so normally combined fleet could react and bring an extra unit, but you'll also recall that Yamamoto was assassinated. Ozawa is now in charge of combined fleet, which means it doesn't quite reach down here to Biak. So, and Ozawa actually is only at 2 anyway. So at this point, it's 2 + 2 is 4. He rolls intel, but chooses not to react, and so this is a no-brainer. The Marine Division defeats the 2-6 with no possible casualties in return there. These are the positions here after post-battle movement. You can see that Lexington is providing air cover over Biak. The other folks have moved back to original positions. They're pretty much setting up to ultimately take bomber base at Marcus using Halsey. Halsey being a 2-0C, we're going to need to go after Marcus rather than Iwo Jima. You'll notice here we don't have any 3-0Cs in our hand. And if we back out here, you can see that Iwo Jima is actually totally uncovered. So if we had a 3-0C, we could potentially grab Iwo Jima as our bomber base. But with only 2-0Cs available, and in particular Halsey here, we're going to probably end up going after Marcus there. At this point, that's my card. And so Antero now plays a central agreement, which ends ISR. It's also a card that allows you to discard something and then pull something out of the draw pile. That's always fun. And in this situation, he discards the Tinian Raid and pulls Indian Worker Strike, which is really, really nasty from my perspective, because what that does is, when he plays that, it's going to have two effects. One is it's going to move the India track further over, so that it will be, I'll have one less turn to retake India at this point. But then on top of that, the challenge is going to be that I will not get ground replacements in India again. And so I'm basically going to be down 4 ground replacements in India with one less turn available to try and retake it. So the fact that he had that central agreement card, the ending ISR, that's nice for him. And actually, let's go flip up here. It's now that he's out of ISR, I have to start worrying about all of his 9-12 reaction stacks, which he's got in a number of spots here. But the other thing I really have to worry about is that draw, which is going to really hose up things in India. So nothing to be done about it at this point. It is what it is. And so we go on and let's take a look at what we can do for another card here. For my next operation, I decided to take a crack at Dacca. Again, you'll recall that the goal is to take out the CVL here, and if I can take out some more air along with it, that would be good. But basically, I want to try and set myself up to be able to attack his ground stack at some point and do some casualties there to soften him up before I go and attack over land. So what I decided to do is to actually use Anakim as a 2 OC, because War in Europe is a 2 OC. I need that for the War in Europe event. Sextant is a 2 OC. And let me just stop here for a second, because I don't think I said anything about Sextant when we were looking at the cards originally. It's interesting. This is a get out of ISR card, and you might wonder why I didn't play it right away. The answer is that I didn't need to play it right away. At this point, being in ISR is not particularly hurting me, and so a good approach to ISR is, if you've got a card that'll get you out, but you don't need to be out, don't worry about playing the card. Hold on to the card until you really have to be out of ISR, because you never know what the timing of the other guy's card play is going to be. So in any event, Sextant does end ISR. It also gives me some Chinese ground replacements and an air replacement step. That's nice when it happens. Definitely going to use that for the event as well. So I need I really want a 2 OC over here, mostly for the low intel value. So I'm going to use Anakim for that. Play it as operations on SEAC. That gives me 3 activations. So I've got the Warspite here, which actually will sail up and be in the hex there. And then the 2 air units are going to fly over to Calcutta, and they'll participate in the battle from Calcutta. He does make his intel on this one. I think he rolled a 0. And so what he does is he activates these 3 guys. So it's basically, what is that, 33 or 34 for him and 33 for me. I've got a +1 because it's 1943, and I've got Allied, actually American air in the Allied contingent here. We end up with a 1 times result on both players. So what that does is it flips everything for me. So I got to flip SEAC Air, I got to flip the 14th Air Force, and I got to flip the Warspite. That then flips, I have to start by flipping his 2. I have 1 more step, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that last step, even though in some ways it might be nice to take out one of these elite air divisions here. What I really want to do here is I want to get rid of this CVL. And the reason I want to get rid of it again is because he cannot stack air in there, and so I'm going to hopefully have a shot at those ground forces. So it's a 1-for-1 trade in steps, which the Allies will always take. The Warspite will head back there in PBM, and that is the end of my operation there, which was reasonably successful. By stripping the CVL from Dacca here, Antero is really forced to cover it with naval, so he plays an OC activation and moves the Congo from Miri up to Dacca to cover there. And he actually uses the opportunity to move Nagato over to Singapore and moves the air division from Hanoi down to, whoops, a little too far down to Sarong to cover Vogelkop in Western New Guinea there. So at this point, what I've managed to do is, by stripping off the CVL and sort of pushing him to respond there with naval, that's now given me an opportunity to use my sub card. Unfortunately, I fail. The detonators are still no good, apparently, and so we fail on that. But we do get a draw, and so we play that as event, and we do get a draw, which works out to be Operation Stalemate, which is actually a nice military event card, so we'll be able to come back and use that at some point here. For the moment, he's played his deployment here, and it's back over to me, and at this point, I am going to go ahead and just play the Bataan Death March to get that out there and increase my my political will from 3 to 4. And so we play that as the event here, and that brings political will from +3 to +4. And at this point, he is sort of waiting to see what I'm going to do. He's covered his one main risk over there. So he goes ahead and uses his one pass. So I decide that it's time to go ahead and put together a Halsey carrier raid to take my bomber base. Halsey's 8 on Central Pacific, giving me a total of 11 activations. You'll notice what I've done is there are 3 reaction stacks that have, now that he's out of ISR, that have 912s that are stacked with naval units that could come into Marcus and create problems for me here, since I've only got 1 Marine division. I don't want that, so I need to pin all 3 of those stacks, which I do here, and then I've got enough force here that if he reacts with as much as he can react with, and also has a kamikaze, that I'm still assured of a successful invasion. And in fact, I actually get surprise. He does not roll well. He doesn't have a card, so I get surprise. So this, so the 27th Air Force here goes to the dead pool. Shikaku is actually flipped here, and Wasp was flipped as well. Because these guys are both 8s, I get a half result rolling poorly here, but that's still enough. Since they're both in base, to be able to send the Kaio to the dead pool. And San Jacinto hits Zuiho over here, but Zuiho manages, to crit the San Jacinto back. Here is the PBM after that operation. You'll notice the Marines are obviously sort of hanging out here, and they look a little bit isolated, but in the grand scheme of things, they've got a clear supply path. There's no issues there. And they're not really at risk, because at this point in the game, in general, the Japanese are not going to go after a Marine division by way of amphibious assault. It would take basically everything he's got defending the Pacific to have a chance to take me out, and I would take most of them with me. So it's really not a very good move for the Japanese to go try something like that. So he's safe up there, I think, until I can get some air cover there. The one thing you will notice is I haven't put anybody into Biak yet, other than Lexington, to provide air. And the main reason for that is that if you check the trace, let's put the air COIs back up again. So if you check the trace from Oahu, although it's exactly 25 to Biak, I've still got this ZOI sitting in the way here that's blocking. And so until I can get that ZOI out of there, anybody over here is not going to be in command range, activation range from Oahu for Central Pacific. So at this point, these guys are just within activation and supply range. So I've got more flexibility to use them either with Southwest or Central Pacific. So that's where my PPM ended up. And then in his next card, you'll see he's got a couple of issues with his ZOIs. First of all, he's got nothing at all over Truck here where he's got South Seas HQ. So he's going to bring this guy in to provide air cover there and patch that ZOI hole. And that will continue to block the trace from Oahu for the time being. So until I get rid of any air units that are over Truck, I'm still not going to be able to activate anybody at Biak from Central Pacific. Then the other thing he decides to do here is fall back and defend Iwo Jima a little bit better. First of all, there's a benefit to Iwo Jima from a strategic bombing perspective because it's within 5 hexes of Tokyo. And so I really would like to end up there as well. but it's also a gap in his ZOI in a place that I can eventually base a ZOI that would potentially help to provide blockade air coverage. So to avoid that possibility, he activates the reduced army at Inuitak and pulls it back to Iwo Jima. And he's using a 3-0C here, so he can just get there all the way from Sarong. So he pulls this guy up through the Marianas to get there. And so he's essentially abandoning Western New Guinea down here with no ZOI down there anymore. He's got his ZOIs back in shape here, and he's got Iwo Jima well defended. And so that was his next play there. After he does his redeployment in the Pacific there to cover his ZOI hole, I come back over here and to the CBI and decide to go ahead and use my 10C. I don't really think I'm going to get any chance to use it for intercept, so I'm not going to get a draw for it, but it's a nice card. I'll play it as an OC here, and that's going to give me, I can use the Indomitable, and this guy over here, that gives me a +1, and I've got a really good chance of getting surprise, which I get. And I'm attacking Congo here again. Remember, I'm trying to strip off his naval cover, and so I managed to successfully flip the Congo there with that surprise attack, which is nice. Then he goes ahead, and it gets a little interesting here because you remember I've got this Sextant card, which is a get out of ISR card, and I talked about not playing it until you really need to play it. Well, what he plays next is he plays an ISR card. And you'll notice I'm in ISR, and I've been in ISR for a long time, but he really wants to draw, and he's decided at this point that if I had to get out of ISR card, I probably would have played it by now. And really wanting that card, he decides to go ahead and do it. That makes a big difference because you'll notice we are here at the end of 1943. Once we get into 1944, he's not going to have a chance to reshuffle his deck because if Tojo comes out in 44 or 45, it has to get played for the event, not as an OC. So he's just played his last ISR card on me and is not going to get a chance to shuffle unless he actually has Tojo here in his last couple of cards. And that will mean that I'll be able to spend the entire rest of the game not under ISR when I finally choose to get out using Sextant. So outweighting him on that one has really helped me here at the end. And you'll notice here that I forgot to play Halsey as the event when I ran that operation to take my bomber base here. So let's get rid of him now. And the reason we need to do that is that we are going to play actually Sextant into the FO, because I really don't see a need to get out of ISR right at this moment. I do want to play an FO card, and so I'm just going to flip this over and play it as my FO, and I will get out of ISR next turn. For his next card, Antero plays Island Fortifications, which gives him a +1 in ground combat in 1-hex islands for the rest of the game. And then I decide to go ahead and pull out Operation Stalemate here. And you can see I've got 2 cards left. I'm going to play War in Europe. I've already played, obviously, to the FO. I just did that. I'm going to play War in Europe. Since we are in 43, it's going to be worth 2, but that'll be great because it'll move us up the track 2 more. Stalemate is 6 on Central Pacific, so that'll give me 9 in total. And I'm playing it basically with a long-term or longer-term view of progress of war. What I'm going to do is I've decided I'm going to take Rabaul this turn. That's going to give me the opportunity, and you'll notice I'm already in good shape on progress of war this turn, so I'm not going to have any problem making my 3 this turn. I set up, once I take Rabaul, I set up the ability to take Guadalcanal, which will convert all the rest of these hexes. So next turn I get the Solomons, which will automatically, and that's basically going to be without a fight. So with 1 amphibious assault without a major fight, I can get all my progress of war next turn. And you'll notice I've already got Kwajalein here. He's abandoned Eniwetok, and so that means the turn after I'm going to be set up to take Eniwetok. And actually I could do it in either order I wanted to, but basically I'm setting up to take all the Solomons and all the Marshals on the next 2 turns with essentially no effort. So I'm in good shape at this point on progress of war. So what Stalemate is doing is I'm actually only using one activation for the Marines here. I'm not sending any support. The Marines will automatically win this no matter what happens, because on a half result they still kill the defender. Since he's got +3 and I'm halved, if he rolls a 6 or better, he'll actually do a hit on my Marines. But when you do this without any particularly naval support, you have to be really careful that the other guy doesn't have anybody within range that can hit. And so you'll notice that what I've done here is I'm attacking. I'm basically trying to do as much damage to his units as I can, and I've obviously pinned all his naval units, which are at 3 locations here and then up here at Tokyo as well. And so he then activates, and because this is a 3.0C, and let's go ahead and play that. So we're playing it as the event. So because it's a 3.0C, he's able to get forces in from quite a distance. So he brings in this guy from Makassar here, this guy from Davao. The Nagato comes in from Singapore, and these guys come in from Okinawa to participate at Tokyo. To speed things along here, I've flipped units to show the actual results, but what I want to do is take a little bit of time to walk you through the individual combats and show you what Antero has done here. In particular, as the Japanese, it's fairly risky to be trading. You don't want to do it without thinking about it carefully, and this is just a really good example of how Antero has decided to react in a smart way to sort of maximize a combination of maximizing Japanese damage and in other cases minimizing it. And so let's just walk through real quickly. First of all, down here at A, this guy is going to die. He did have a 40% chance on a 6 through 9 of flipping my Marines, but he missed on that one. If we go up here to Battle B, basically there was no reaction to support that. There was not a whole lot that Antero could do there really, and these are also not major units. So essentially here what happens is this guy dies and no damage to me. If we look at Saipan, here's a place where if Antero doesn't react and I get a 1x result, then I could flip Yamato and kill Shikaku. And so what he did was he brought in, the 25th was actually full strength before the combat started, so he brought in a half strength 21st and a full strength 25th to participate. That helps protect the naval forces and also gives him some extra strength. So he's got actually 45 to my 30 because the battleship was not flipped when we started. But he rolls a 1 times and I roll a half time. So with my half times result, literally at this point all I can do is flip the 25th Air Force, which was exactly what he was hoping for. With his 1 time result, he's going to flip the Washington, and he's actually brought in exactly enough. He brought in 45, he needed 44, so he's actually able to eliminate the Bunker Hill there. So that was a good combat for him. Then up here, the reason that he brought in the 51st Air Force to participate at Iwo Jima is because this is full strength. His elite air is half strength. So at this point, if I get a hit, I'm going to be forced to take it on the full strength unit. Unfortunately for him, I got really lucky here and I got a crit. So the crit actually allows me to go ahead and kill the elite air there. So that was really a nice roll for me on that one. Up here, we ended up getting 1 times on each other. So basically there were 2 full strength units on each side to start this, and all 4 units end up getting flipped. So again, as the Allies, anytime you're trading 1 for 1 like that, you really can't complain too much because you got so many more forces and replacements that's perfectly fine if that's what happens. And then down here, he brought in Nagato defensively. This guy was not flipped to start with, so with a 10 on a 1x result, I would eliminate the Zuiho. But with Nagato in the battle, I can't do any damage unless I crit because Nagato's full strength, and so I can't hit Zuiho without hitting Nagato, and I can't hit Nagato. I did not crit, and he did get a half times result on me, so this guy gets flipped. So what that ends up being is, if I remember right, I think I did 5 steps on him, and he did 6 on me. And so at the end of the day, that's not a bad result. As the Allies, you're really looking to try and take steps off wherever you can, and a roughly 1 for 1 result is good. And as well, I managed to take Rabaul. You'll recall that the first progress of war this turn was up here. Actually, sorry, I lie. The first progress of war was at Biak. Second progress of war was the bomber base at Marcus Island. And the third progress of war, and the last one, is here at Rabaul. This now is the post-battle movement after the Rabaul operation with stalemate. You'll notice that these two units, the 51st and the 21st, went back where they started. But because the elite air was eliminated at Iwo Jima and he wants to be able to cover that, he ended up pulling in the 25th Air Force, which had started down at Makassar, as I recall. And so you'll notice that now that leaves no ZOI coverage anywhere down here, which starts to get interesting in terms of thinking about what one might do going forward. But I don't really have the cards to do anything with it at this point this turn. What he does next is, because as you recall, I've only got one card left. It's my War in Europe that I'm going to be playing here in a second. He's got several cards left because of the nature of the offensive draw. You'll recall he got an ISR and was able to pull a draw for that, and also was able to do a swap as well. He's got Indian Workers' Strike, which he had pulled out of the discard pile, which he goes ahead and plays at this point, and that is the card that both moves the unrest marker in India over 1. North India is under Japanese control, and so that'll move over 1 to strikes, and that's what's going to cause India to fall a turn earlier. So instead of having, and remember, it's going to move 1 at the end of the turn as well, so instead of having 2 more turns to get India out of trouble, I'm only going to have 1 more turn, and I'm also not going to have any ground replacements over here to do that with. So that's going to definitely be a big challenge here. So then we're down to my last card. I go ahead and play the War in Europe card. We play that as the event. It's worth 2 in 1943. You might think, well, would it be worth saving it to 1944 because next turn is 1944, and it's worth 1 more in 1944 than it is in 1943. But remember, I just need to get out of -5 because this is where I'm losing an ASP every turn, and I can't afford to keep losing ASPs. So I go ahead and play that. I move it up 2 here, and we now are no longer losing ASPs next turn. So that means I'm going to get my first ASP reinforcement since about, I want to say, turn 3, sorry. All right, let's go ahead, turn those guys off. At this point, he has 2 cards left. He plays 1 into FO, and then he plays some real fun, and he plays Gandhi, Indian Independence. That's the other Gandhi card, and it's basically just like Workers' Strike in that it moves this over 1 more, and also prevents replacements. But you'll realize now very quickly that what this means is that in the national status segment, because he still controls North India, this is going to move over 1 more, and India is going to go into revolt. And when India goes into revolt, all kinds of nasty things will happen. The first unpleasant thing that happens when India revolts is that you lose 2 political will. So I go from being in safe territory at +4 to rather unsafe territory at +2, because you'll remember the Tojo resigns card actually moves political will down by 2. So that puts the U.S. in a really risky position here. And then the other, perhaps even more unpleasant thing that happens when India revolts is that the Allies lose a card permanently, a card each turn for the rest of the game. So the Allied draw goes from 7 cards down to 6. And we're in turn 8 here, so there's 5 turns left in the game. So that means I'm going to lose 5 cards total, which is almost the equivalent of a turn. So it's really like, and if you consider that I lost a card through War in Europe as well, that's 6 cards. That's basically having the game shortened by a turn, which from an ally perspective makes things a lot more challenging. And so at this point, I'm thinking, this is crazy. You know, I'm down a card for the rest of the game. Do I really have any chance here? Should I go ahead and resign? And I pretty quickly came to the conclusion that it would be actually kind of fun to play this out from the perspective that I haven't played in a situation before where India is revolted, so I really have no idea how to play it, and so this is a good opportunity to figure it out. And then I also looked and I said, well, you know, if he has If he draws the Tojo Resigns card next turn, that's game over anyway. That's the cards telling me that I shouldn't keep playing. So let's just see what happens. And if he draws Tojo Resigns, then it's game over and I've lost. If he doesn't draw Tojo Resigns, then I'm going to keep playing and see what it's like to actually play with India in Revolt. So as it turns out, he doesn't draw Tojo Resigns, and I do keep playing. And you guys are going to get to find out with me how we might play the Allies when India is in revolt.